Hello and welcome to another happiness class 26 of 33 in this course. This is a weekly interactive class where I want to hear what you think. So please ask questions at any time during the show and during the class. Check out past and future classes at bigquestionsanswered.com. This is a practical class that deals with personal to global issues as everything affects our happiness. This week, the first half hour will be about fashion. So we will talk about the good, the bad, and the future of it. The second half hour will be about any random questions you have about life. This week I was supposed to have my brother Adil, but he's a bit sick today. Everything I say is based on tried and tested teachings of Islam. And why Islam? Because it is the most inclusive, scientific, comprehensive thought system I know. Please do like the show. Let me just get on with the rest of it. Okay, so let me paste it in here. Let's see if I've got the right. Oops, wrong one. That was some last minute changes. Let's get that in there. There we go. Right. Yep. So, the first thing I want to say about this topic of fashion is I've entitled it Masks. So, and I like to have a focus of what I'm talking about in the next 10 minutes, which is what's wrong with trying to give an impression, a good impression. And the focus of sort of contemplation would be this verse of the Holy Quran, which says, "The true servants of the gracious one are those who walk upon the earth with humility." Um, and hopefully it will make sense why I've referred to this in a minute. So, the first thing I'd like to talk about is what's wrong with giving the right impression for success, right? Makes you look good, right? If you wear the right clothes. So, your ability to serve or make a positive difference is where your value lies. Research shows that people who spend less effort on appearance make more mental space for creativity and things that really matter to them. So there's a great TED talk, Habits of Highly Boring People. I think that's quite a bad title because boring people, they're talking about the most influential people in the world, like, Steve Jobs and uh, Einstein and things like that. So Einstein didn't spend much time on his appearance, obviously. Look at his hair. Steve Jobs wore the same type of clothes every day. Elon Musk gets other people to choose his clothes because he doesn't want to focus on it either, but he's always in the limelight, so I suppose fair enough, get somebody to choose clothes. Um, these people realize that we actually have very limited mental energy, and that has to be used carefully if we want to be successful in any meaningful sense. This has been shown by the increasing problem with decision fatigue in the West that is leading to more regret, stress, and unhappiness with what we choose, whatever we pick. So, whatever you pick, decision fatigue and things like that are going to make you miserable about your choice if you have too many choices to make in the first place. So there's a great TED talk about that as well, the art of choosing and the problems with it. This from a psychological point of view, and it might seem extreme to stop being fashionable, but minimalists are finding that they are happier when collecting more experiences, as they say, rather than things. So minimalists are people who try to spend less on things and money and unnecessary things. So, as I say, if you've got any questions, please, or comments, please do join in. Otherwise, I'll just move on to the next point. And the next point is there is no, the next kind of mini point, and you can see number 2, there is no big deal if you spend a little bit of time on fashion. Okay, so my answer to that would be the more time you spend on fashion, the more likely you are to be depressed. This should not be surprising, as trying to express yourself with a message written on some, but written by somebody, okay, on your T-shirt, a short message using emojis or WhatsApp or a card that doesn't express your feelings in your words is just as bad as trying to express yourself with your body. We are deeper than that, and we'll get depressed if we don't express ourselves to the level we need. This has been shown in a great study by Johan Hari on what he calls the lost connections, where he highlights the issues that make modern society more depressed and anxious, which includes not enough meaningful conversations. He also points out we need meaningful values, which fashion is not part of. The only meaningful value gained by fashion is when monks or people who go for the pilgrimage in Mecca, who basically wear the same dress or clothes, wear very simple clothes and shave their hair, if men, to focus less on materialism and more on unity when we realize underneath our clothes we are basically the same. So, as I say, if you've got any comments, questions, disagree, feel free to join in. Okay, so next point is fashion makes you feel good, some people would say, and this is a response to that. Clothes don't make you happy, just like other material things. Chasing happiness through material things is like chasing a mirage. It always disappears when you get to it. So it's like a mirage. Mirage is always in the distance, and you're rushing towards it. You think it's water, for example, as mirages look like that, and you realize when you get there, it's not there. It's not water at all. So mirage is an illusion. Same thing with chasing materialism. It's an illusion. You think if you get that thing, you'll be happy, but you won't be. And lots of people have tried that out in their lives. There's a lot of lies there today. Okay. Um, so, what makes you happy is being a servant of humanity, doing good things for other people, and so becoming godly in the sense that God is kind to everyone. Everyone gets rain, sunshine, whether they listen to God or not. So it's that's kind of trying to give you a clue as to why that verse of the Quran is really important. It's like if you're a servant of the gracious one, then you have to be like the gracious one. And the word gracious in translated from the Arabic means the one who is kind to everyone. There is also kindness to specific people who listen more and they or make an effort to improve themselves. So that's a different quality of God, counted as mercy, translated as mercy. But this verse of the Quran is pointing to that quality that if you're a servant of the gracious one, that is God, then you should be like the gracious one and be kind to everyone, whether they listen to you or not. So that's what is the sort of antithesis maybe of being fashionable. Fashionable is about making yourself, individualism, looking for yourself, looking at yourself and making yourself look important, or you know trying to feel good by giving yourself attention. But uh, the opposite of the things that actually make people happy are when you're giving to other people, regardless if they are kind to you or not. And we need to not have those boundaries of if people are kind to you, still kind to them, because there's too many boundaries between people. And I think that's one of the major issues that Western society is suffering from, that too many divisions and boundaries and too much hate, too much competition. I'm better than you, and therefore I'm not going to talk to you, and all this kind of stuff. We need to do the exact opposite. So, cool. So I'm going to go through some of the earlier points. So it's oh, by the way, I mentioned earlier. So the person who I normally have somebody with me, but today they're not available because they're sick. So I've got more time here. So let me just discuss some of the points. Or I've got a minute left, so maybe I can go into a bit more detail. So I've said, for example, that uh, you know, yeah, sure, if you want to spend a bit of time on fashion, right? If you're going to do any fashion, the best kind of fashion is less fashion, right? It doesn't mean you wear horrible clothes or torn up clothes. That's a sort of unnecessary fashion. It's about simple clothes and less focus on it. Don't make it into some sort of weird thing where you go over the top and just wear torn clothes that are not practical. You need clothes that keep you warm and things like that. Yeah. So anyway, that's cool. Let's move on to the next point, which is alienation. There we go. Copy that. Okay. So, the first thing I mentioned was about masks, like basically creating a false version of yourself in the public, and that's what fashion does. But now there's another thing, another problem that comes with fashion, which is alienation. We're so disconnected from each other. So that's the title of this second part, the next 9 odd minutes I'm going to talk about. And so I've summarized it into a question, this section. Isn't fashion a good way to express your individuality? I suppose that's another reason why people are into fashion, why fashion is supposed to be so important. And so I'm going to quote something which seems really disconnected or separate from the topic, which is associate with the poor and show them affection. That's what Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said. And by the way, I like to say that different religions teach these ideas. Um, and Islam said you have to believe in all the ancient religions. They were originally from God, so it's not surprising that they teach the same things. But a lot of that truth has been mixed up with man-made ideas and things like that. So Islam, as far as I know, and from all the evidence, is the only religion that is in its pristine condition. We've still got copies of the Quran from the time of Prophet Muhammad, which you can't say from about the Bible and other scriptures. So anyway, the first point I want to say about is somebody might say, I need to express myself to feel alive. Okay, so the happiest countries, in response, the happiest countries I know are the ones where they express their love for others rather than for themselves. When I first moved to the Middle East, I would be confused when I walked past a stranger's house and they would welcome me in. Psychologists tell us that happiness is a meaningful connection that happens when you listen to each other rather than talk past each other. So sometimes we say, hello, how are you doing? And we're not really interested in what the person says. That's kind of talking past the other person. And happiness, as I mentioned in an earlier quote, or the opposite of it, depression. Depression comes from the lack of meaningful connection or conversations or deep conversations with each other. So if you want to be happy, you need deep, meaningful conversations where people are listening to each other. So instead of everybody trying to say, this is me through fashion, I think they should ask others, who are you really? And then listen. So we really need to listen to each other. That's my first point. Again, feel free to ask questions. Let's see what's happening up there. Okay. Get rid of that. Block spam on the chat. There we go. All right. Okay. So the next point. Some might say I'm not like everyone, and people need to see that. I think that's very true of individualistic societies. They want to show how great or special you are. That's why you might spend loads of money on an expensive bit of clothing or something to somehow show your superiority, or you're at least equal through your clothes. So what is it that you would like people to see about you would be the first question I'd ask to somebody who thinks that they need to prove their individuality through their clothes. Is it that you are special or better than other people in some way? Everyone has a goal that dominates them. Make your goal to compete with each other in good deeds. That is what will bring you together. So when you're competing to show you're better than other people, you're actually creating barriers and divisions. You're looking down on people, and you know, it's a kind of it's not a very nice kind of competition. But if you compete in a different way, which is to do good things, when you do good things, you do good things to other people. You can be nice to other people. You're connecting with other people. It's a beautiful way of connecting. And by the way, I've just basically paraphrased from a verse of the Quran which says compete, but the words in the Quran are in Arabic and they're very deep. And it's a strange kind of competition which says compete by helping each other. So you're racing each other, but when the other person falls back, you kind of say, "Hey, let me help you." So that's the idea of this kind of competition, where you're helping each other to be great to each other. And that reminds me of the beautiful kind of um, story, which I won't go fully into, but there was somebody who in the story visits hell, and everybody's got everything they need, okay, except for the spoons are too big for them to eat with those um, the lovely food they have right in front of them. They're so long that they can't put it into their own mouths. When they go to when the same person goes to visit heaven, they see the same situation, except for the people are feeding each other. And it might sound silly, but that's really how real life is. You can stuff your face all you want, you won't be happy. But when you feed other people, and this is what psychologists have shown, okay, that you can buy happiness. There's a great TED talk how you can buy happiness. It shows exactly that you can buy happiness by giving stuff to other people. So yeah, so rather than showing your superiority and creating more division by doing that, in reality, we need to do the opposite. And my little quote is, togetherness is happiness. It's a thing we need to remember. Togetherness is happiness. Of course, it's a difficult thing to do, right? It takes a lot of patience, but anyway, it's another topic. Let's see if anybody's got comments, questions. Nope. Okay, so next bit is we should all stand out from the crowd. So some people would say this: we should all stand out from the crowd to avoid becoming sheeple. Okay, people who are blind followers, a new kind of, well, fairly new word maybe. I haven't heard it too often. I've noticed in London, people find it easier to be mean and miserable to that rather than sorry, they find it easier to be mean and miserable rather than show love to each other. If you want to stand out, show love to those who cannot benefit you, as the poor, basically. Because if you start showing, it's very easy to show love to, I know, your boss or suck up to people, right? That's a different thing. That's not really demonstrating real love. Okay, it might be, but it's easy to be confused about those kind of things. But try demonstrating love to people you cannot get anything from. That's really a sign of who you are, when you're kind to the waiter, as it were, when you don't need to be. Be that kind of leader, because people want to be kind, but are scared of being first. They want to copy someone. When I lived in the Middle East, I love you was a normal expression, and that kind of freedom to express themselves makes people happier. Expressing yourself through emojis or somebody else's words on a postcard or clothes uh, will not make you feel connected. It will make you feel disconnected. Cool. If you got any comments, please comment, ask questions, disagree. If you disagree, feel free. Yeah, I'm taking it easy, by the way, because it's hard to keep talking forever. Normally, you've got the aid of somebody to chat with. Let's copy the next slide in. Oh, still got 20 seconds. Oh, I should be talking about that a bit more. So, what have I got to say about alienation for 10 seconds? Nothing. Nothing. I'll just leave it at that. Enough food for thought already. Okay. Okay. Is that the right one? Insecurity. That's another problem that comes from another very well-known problem that comes from fashion. Okay. So, yeah, let me check everything's okay there. Right, there we go. So insecurity, and as again, here's a focused question: how can we fix body image issues? It's a major problem. If you don't know what body image issues are, um, a lot of people, especially young people nowadays, who have brought up in the social media age, are really insecure about themselves, about their bodies, and how they feel about themselves, leading to things like anorexia and things like that. Okay, so that's what body image issues are. And so Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, says, in the latter days, there will be people who will have, so this is the answer basically, in the latter days, there will be people who will have regard only for appearance and will be averse to inner improvement. He was asked, why would that be? He answered, because of the desire to please some people and out of fear of others. As I say, in the description, there's a link to the summary material that I'm basically reading from. Do check it out. And it's got all sorts of references and things like that. So helpful in that way. So anyway, the known causes of body image issues. Okay? Body image issues happen when people give too much importance to outward appearance. This happens in Western societies where people are treated like objects, one quickly being replaced by another in relationships, just like replacing an iPhone that you've got bored of. So again, there's a reference to studies, psychological study at least one, but there's loads, yeah, to that demonstrates that outward appearance, relying on your outward appearance, um, as a society is really dangerous for you, um, because everybody's treated like an object. Everybody can be replaced. Uh, there's no inherent value. As you get old, you lose value, and you can see that in modern day society. That older people in Western societies, at least, are treated really badly, as if they've got no monetary use anymore. Maybe they're just a cost to the health service, and yeah, they're not treated very well in Western societies, which is the opposite of what you find in Eastern societies, where they're the center of families. Yeah. Okay, so the real causes. Number two, the real causes. I've got all these points there. Hopefully, you noticed them. Real causes of body image issues. People want to be loved. If you love others for how they look, then you will expect others to treat you the same. So you might not know if that's true, but like there's studies on people who watch too much pornography, for example, and they have issues in relating to having their daughters, for example, uh, have a relationship with anyone because they see themselves as untrustworthy people. They start trusting other people less as well. So if you think of people in a certain way, like material objects, you will expect them to see you the same way. Okay, so that's really what's behind. That's the real cause of body image issues. So an insecurity that's gained from your own bad way of thinking, or selfish or individualistic or short-term way of thinking. So it's a matter of time. If you see other people as objects and they will see you as objects, then it's a matter of time when the person who's supposed to be in love with you will get bored of you. And then, that's obviously going to cause you anxiety, because it's only a matter of time before you get replaced. So the last point is how to fix body image issues. I kind of pointed out the problem, but what is the solution? When you cover less or wear skin tight clothes, you have to worry about every inch of your body. So not wearing much, skin tight clothes, everything's effectively showing. And then you're going to be thinking about it, right? It's just natural. Muslim men and women wear loose clothes and keep well covered in public. Muslims also focus their attention on family love, which means their attention is kept away even more from their appearances and therefore body image issues. So it's not surprising that a study shows that this is a quote, veiled Muslim women had a more positive trait body image than did Christian women and atheist women. Accordingly, veiled Muslim women reported lower levels of thin ideal internalization, basically the need to be really skinny, okay, or the pressure to be thin, and physical appearance comparisons than did Christian women and atheist women, right? So it's basically saying people who people who wear the veil also generally wear very loose clothes out in public. So their bodies don't really show, and they're not thinking about their bodies all the time. And instead, what they're doing is thinking about families and things like that. And they're not spending all their time on their parents, and then their children don't see that negative role model. So if you're a mum and you're just wearing skin tight clothes and revealing clothes all the time, your children will see that and they'll go, oh, that's really important. I've got to do that as well. And they learn the same bad habits, right? So it's inevitable that if you focus on your appearance, wear skin tight clothes, wear revealing clothes, then you're going to feel anxious about it. And the easy way is to not do that. Be a leader and not follow the sort of self objectification, turning yourself into an object to be, impressed by your outer appearance. Yeah. So I find people who are very much so the people I know who spend too much time on their outwards appearance are less confident. Maybe when you're a kid, yeah, you can go and do that, but then you're not going to be very confident. I've noticed people, even the kids who are too much into body image and building too much into muscles, they're not that confident. But especially if you're older and you're still doing that, because it's kind of like you kind of get over that, putting all your value into your muscles and things like that, which is kind of a low bar in terms of showing who you are. Okay, cool. We've got some comments. Thank you very much. I don't follow fashion. I wear what suits me. Cool. Good for you. So we can always claim that. So if you spend more money than you need to, and so if a £5 shirt doesn't suit you and you're saying that, then it's probably not true. If fashion is not important, why can't we walk around without any clothes on? As I said, it's good to wear simple clothes. That kind of thing. I've already mentioned that you should wear clothes that keep you warm. We're talking about fashion, but fashion's different to wearing actual clothes. Okay, cool. So thanks for those comments. Yes, so some great questions I've had from some friends. So let me quickly post them in, paste them in. First one is this one, health and happiness. Okay. So, what can we say about health and happiness? Let me just get to some notes. Okay, so um, health and happiness. Can you truly have both? When any one of you eats, this is a quote from Prophet Muhammad as a response, I would say. When any one of you eats food, he should lick his fingers, for he does not know in what part of the food um, sticking to his fingers the blessing lies. So again, a lot of the time, um, people won't see the relevance of that comment straight away. What's that got to do with health and happiness, and what is, how does it explain the connection or anything like that? Yeah, but hopefully, and that's partly because we don't reflect enough on these spiritual issues, so we can't see the connection straight away. But with practice, by hopefully listening to these things, you will hopefully find that. But also, we because we are so, as a society, so bad at happiness, um, where we don't know what is it that we should really look at for happiness. So that's part of the reason why some of these quotes might be kind of might not be obvious why they're important, but hopefully you will see that in a minute. So one question, sub question would be, what is the link between happiness and health? So we're talking about health and happiness. Can you have both? Well, so what's the link between them, if any? So all ancient religions, at least at their origins, promise happiness if you take the necessary actions. Religions are action orientated faiths. Okay. So you might think some modern versions of religion, so modern versions of Christianity sometimes taught us just have faith, right? But that's not the original teachings of Jesus at all. He said he came to complete the law. Basically, he was just following the law of Moses, right? So, but very few Christians follow that anymore. So often they get the wrong impression about what it is to follow a religion. It's actions that produce results, not just believing things. Anyway, so all ancient religions, at least at their origins, promise happiness if you take the necessary actions. Some actions obviously relate to happiness, and some are not so obvious. So those actions involve those actions generally in religion involve things like being nice to your neighbors, or not eating too much, or being grateful, etc. All these things affect your health positively. Being neighborly makes us less isolated, and so fights the biggest killer in the West, loneliness. Eating too much makes you obese, so also one of the biggest killers in the West, including the main cause of COVID turning into a fatal disease. Being grateful makes you more positive and therefore less stressed. So that's an effect on your body. So good, So all these things we're doing affect your body positively, right? So stress is a bad effect on your body. If you didn't know, if you thought it was just in your mind, it's not. It gives you heart attacks and all sorts of negative effects on your body, ages you, and so many other things. In fact, one of my favorite tricks for both happiness thoughts, uh, I don't know what that thing I'm reading is, but anyway, so one of my favorite tricks, I think I was going to quote based on this, is to finish eating your food, like completely clean your food. So it's a beautiful trick in making you grateful. So there's a funny thing what I've described as a happiness paradox, which is despite having when you have a lot of something, we actually become ungrateful for it. We just become accustomed to it. Like air and stuff like that. Imagine you didn't have much air, then you'd be like, oh my god, yeah, I got that air. Yes, I got the tank, the tank of air, and you're really grateful for it. But when you have tons of something, loads of food included, then we become ungrateful and we actually become miserable. So a way to the antidote to that is to actually make an effort to finish every bit of the plate, but don't eat too much in the first place. Don't put too much in your plate in the first place. And when I say finish, like this is with your fingers, is an added benefit of doing it. So there's so many like uh, wonderful benefits of these different teachings, and especially in Islam, which is such a precise religion, so much detail, and all these great self-help techniques. So, just for example, the one I said about licking your fingers. So, for first of all, licking your fingers um, uh, releases some sort of enzymes in your mouth, and then it helps the digestion. But eating with your hands itself, it's amazing that your fingers somehow communicate to your digestive system by touch, saying this is what the food is, this is the food that's on its way, get ready. And it helps the digestion system, so helping the digestion system, makes you healthier. And so if you're healthier, you're going to be happier, because if you're really sick, you're not going to be very happy, is it? Not generally, right? So I'll kind of talk about that a little bit later. What about in situations when you can't, you know, control your health? Maybe you got cancer or something like that. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But the most amazing thing is, you might not realize somehow, but these teachings were taught 1500 years ago, and there's so many amazing truths in them, so much benefit in them. But again, go to the description below where you got the summary text, which includes all sorts of references to studies that I'm pointing out, about, like, for example, this miracle of digestion using your hands, things, following this advice of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Anyway, how do you find lasting happiness? So that's kind of an important part of the question. What is happiness? How do you get lasting happiness? We don't want short-term happiness like drugs and things, because that makes you miserable in the long term. So how do you get lasting happiness? So there are a couple of factors that psychologists have known for a long time, but the general public somehow still have not picked up on. So one key factor is meaning. One of the greatest psychologists of the last century, Viktor Frankl, wrote about this in his book Man's Search for Meaning. Most people in the UK think, so we need meaning, but at the same time, most people in the UK think their jobs are meaningless, right? This is according to a study by a book entitled BS Jobs. So you can translate what BS means, right? Not good jobs, let's say. Okay, so most people what does it say? Most people are considering what the meaning of their lives is. Most people are not considering what the meaning of their lives is, so they are paying the price, right? You're living randomly, just trying to make some more money, but you're not thinking about the point of that. And then eventually you get used to the money and you realize that it doesn't really do much good for you, right? Okay. And another problem, or another key to finding lasting happiness, is, or a key part of finding meaning, is to know God exists, right? And so you might go, hang on a minute, this is supposed to be scientific, this discussion. God is just a faith thing. No, actually. So just to give you an idea of how, like, God must exist, just simple maths and probabilities, right? Hemoglobin molecule, to make one of them should take millions of times the age of the universe, right? And you need 270 million hemoglobin molecules to make one red blood cell. And you need 5 million red blood cells to make a drop of blood the size of a pinhead, right? That's how impossible it is to even create a drop of blood. Okay, so try not believing God after that. Okay, these are incredible things that need to be done. By the way, hemoglobin is not just stuff that makes your blood red, it makes your blood work, it gets oxygen to go around. So anyway, I said cancer. I didn't really have much time for that. Like, what happens if you're you can't control your health, so it's not the best situation. But let's say you got cancer. Very quickly, I'll say, yeah, even the true happiness comes from inside, right? And people who, there's a great quote from Martin Luther King, maybe I'll quickly throw that in. A man who has not discovered something that he would die for, he isn't fit to live. I don't totally agree with that exactly, but it's kind of true. Like, you need to really find what, people are happy dying for things they really believe in, is my short answer to that. Do comment in the comment below anytime. I can always in the non-live comments if you're watching this afterwards, and I can answer questions or things you might disagree with. Anyway, so there's another great question from a friend, and it's this. How can you avoid being resentful? So again, I'm going to focus an answer based on a quote from Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Restore the ties of kinship with him who has cut them asunder. Old English for broken those. Kinship is family relationships. So build those family relationships even with people who have broken them, right? And I'll talk about why in a minute. Be gracious or kind, gracious, isn't it? Giving to people who treat you badly, and tell the truth even if it's against yourself. And these are really just major issues in modern day societies. Why families don't really stick together, why people are becoming isolated because families don't stick together. Meanness towards each other is really unfortunate and common. And one of the reasons why people are mean is because they're not honest. So there's a really good example is the whole debate between what's it called, vaccine, pro-vax, you might call it, and anti-vax, which again are really silly categories, because the anti-vax people definitely must have taken loads of vaccinations, so they're not actually against vaccination, but these are categories made by, let's say, the pro-vax group. Okay, and so there's really lack of an honest discussion about the facts, and they just ignore them and don't listen to each other. And so that's one of the major issues. And there's just one issue. This whole anti-vax, pro-vax, whatever situation, it's not come by itself. There were loads of problems before, loads of division before the pandemic, and it's because of lack of honesty. So what I mean by lack of honesty is people debating with each other, not listening for the truth. They're just trying to win a debate rather than learn the truth. So those are really key issues for division in society. But then you might go, what's that got to do with being resentful? I would say that kind of, in short, that division causes resent. So let me explain, what is it? Why are people resentful at all? What is resentment? It's the sense of feeling towards somebody else that they didn't do what they were supposed to do. I'm not sure if that's a dictionary definition, but that's the feeling behind it. It's like, I resent you. You don't it's not regret. Regret is different to resent. Yeah, resent means you don't like the other person for something they did, and you regret having maybe a relationship with them, or knowing them, or depending on them in any way, right? And so maybe you're beginning to see why that quote from Prophet Muhammad is so important. It's because in an individualistic society, it's very easy to resent people. There's a word going around, and it's toxic. Everybody's becoming toxic. If you don't do what I expect you to do the right way, then you're toxic. You just get shoved into that label. And in an individualistic society, in our short-term thinking, because individualistic way of thinking is very short-term, because we can see again and again it's leading to so much misery. As I said before, what was it? isolation and loneliness is the biggest killer in the West. So if we can see that happening, that's being an issue, and we're still being individualistic. We're still jumping into resentment and calling people toxic way too easily. I say way too easily. It is in the heat of the moment. If you feel that we can get upset and we can feel like, oh, there's no other way around it, sort of thing, right? I'm subject to that, right? I'm always questioning, like, I'm loads of people are being rude to me all the time, even when I'm really nice to them, right? Uh, all sorts of things I do for them, and they'll still be rude to me. But I don't really talk about those things too much because, first of all, they're not going to listen by me correcting them a lot of the time. You can correct them some of the time, but there's another quote from the Quran that says that for people who don't want to listen, you just say peace and move on because you're fighting people for no good reason. And that's another reason, another thing that causes resentment. When you argue with people that don't want to listen in the first place, then the feeling of resentment increases. Um, so, and in a place, as I said, in a time which is our time, in societies like our societies, there's so much division. Somebody needs to go the other way, be a leader, and say, you know what, everybody's fighting, but I'm going to be the person who stands up and says, I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to build the bridges. Okay, I'm going to be kind when people are not being kind, because that's what's happening in society. Yeah. Um, anyway, number two, what methods are there to avoid being resentful? So it's the same question as how do you find happiness, really? And one beautiful, very simple way of finding happiness, there's a quote from Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It says, paradise, and paradise is in this life and the next. Paradise is the home of the generous. That's a short version of what this quote I just read was. Restore the ties of kinship, build those family relationships again, even from those people who have broken them, right? I'm constantly phoning people up, connecting people, and teaching people's kids for free, from relatives, just to build those connections. Not necessarily, I don't want people to get the wrong impression that people have broken those relationships, but generally, I think a lot of people, if you live in a Western society, you can pick up those bad habits of Western societies and not build those relationships that you should. Anyway, so what methods are there being? How can you avoid being resentful? One very simple technique is do things for other people without an expectation. Another quote from Prophet Muhammad was, "The hand that gives is better than the one that takes." For example, sorry. So the hand that gives is better than the one that takes. When you have that attitude, when you have that attitude, um, you stop expecting things from people. Resentment comes from a sort of expectation of people. Okay, but then instead of you might say, "Oh, that sounds pretty miserable, not to expect things from other people." But first of all, I find I'm much happier than most people I know, right? Um, because even when I'm treated badly or whatever, I'm kind to people and I enjoy that kindness. And it's not like that's the end of the story. What happens is when you're kind, you attract like people with the same sort of attitude, and you become open to all the great things that are happening, and you're more positive and you're less scared of all the world. When you're resentful, you start narrowing your experience of the world, and you say, I can't talk to this person because something will go wrong, I'm going to regret it, that person's toxic and it's going to be dangerous for my happiness. But if you don't depend on that person to do anything for you, then you actually just have more and more experiences, and you learn and you grow and you become stronger, and you become more and more independent of people, and you realize you don't need to depend on X, Y, and Z. But there are going to be a few people eventually that you will find happiness with. Cool. Right. What's the last question? So these are those two questions was from a friend, but this one's from I see these quotes on the internet, and I just say, okay, people give these kind of quotes lots of likes, so maybe some people believe in them, right? And I think they kind of generally reflect um, the feelings in a very much individualistic societies. And this is the one from some celebrity called Tom Hardy. Okay, so anyway, whoever he is, kind of, I've seen his face around. Never let a person show you twice they don't want you. Have some respect and walk away. That's a very interesting thing to say. So I've tried to break that down into different potential ways of looking at it, because like, what kind of relationships are you talking about? So maybe it felt like maybe he's talking about a romantic relationship, so I'll deal with that first. So in a romantic relationship, you should you keep trying after being rejected? So that's a interesting question. And so again, here's a quote, which is kind of, I think I quoted it earlier on, even in this session. And the servants of the gracious God are those who walk on the earth modestly, and when the ignorant address them, they say peace. Okay. So, first of all, as I said before, if you're going to be a servant of the gracious God, it's not really about you walking away from people who disrespected you in a way, like they don't want you. In a modern day societies, people are doing that, being nasty to each other all the time. You're going to be walking away from everybody if you have that attitude, and you're going to be alone, going to be miserable. And you might say, well, actually, no, I'm going to be quite happy away from negative people. But in reality, everybody's got some issues with them, about them, and we've got to find ways of working around that, including myself. I struggle with that. Um, so, so in the funny thing about romantic relationships, they're built on very flimsy ground. Is like the whole idea of romantic relationships is actually quite a new idea. If you go back to something like Shakespeare's time, the was it Romeo and Juliet? That's actually considered a comedy. They didn't really believe in romanticism. It was a kind of a relatively new idea at that time. Okay, the idea, let's just talk about what it means to be a romantic and why it's such a flimsy idea. It's like there's this one person, there's a soulmate that you are destined to have, and you're connected really through their looks most of the time. Okay, especially if you look at the movies, right? You don't have ugly people falling in love, do you? It's like the most good-looking woman and the most good-looking man falling in love on movie. It just wouldn't work in a Hollywood movie for there to be a romantic relationship between two ugly people, right? Just just reflects how we think about romantic relationships. And so it's the idea that there's this mystical force between two people, and then at the same time you have these things called office relationships. And the reality is, if you look at psychological studies, I think I read one where basically you basically fall in love with the person you're nearest to. It's not some mystical thing. And so in reality, what you're doing is you've objectified people. You looked at their surface, you don't really care about if they're a really kind person. Okay, it's just somebody that you find, some sort of excitement with, and all this kind of stuff. So in short, romantic relationships are not the strongest kind of relationship in the first place. Just checking if any more comments. Okay. So should you keep trying after being rejected? So if you fell in love with or got into a relationship under such flimsy sort of situations, maybe it's not the best idea to continue with it. Okay. And if you're in a relationship and somebody's like in a proper grown up relationship and somebody's just like I'm not talking to you, then that's not even a grown-up relationship. It's like, what kind of relationship is that? So maybe you need to not get into what we call romantic relationships and more sensible grown-up relationships. So people look down on um, things like arranged marriages, but they're marriages on the idea, based on the idea that, you know what, I have some principles, and it might sound boring, but this is where long lasting happiness comes from. So I have some principles. This is what I believe. I believe in families. I believe that, I'm going to go to work and you'll stay at home. Are you happy with that? You have an agreement, okay? Because why would a mother want to stay at home? Because, take care of the kids. And I think that's pretty important, right? So if you have like family values, that's great. And if you don't have those family values, then, the relationship probably wouldn't work in the first place. If you don't have family values, you don't really have real relationship values. And yeah, so why should you keep trying after being rejected? Probably shouldn't keep trying, I would say, unless it was a good relationship in the first place. So that's one. Number two, um, amongst should you keep trying if it was amongst friends and family who don't want to talk to you? Should you walk away? So that's the second category. If Tom Hardy is talking about general relationships and friends and family. So um, generally, even in the case of romantic relationships, right, that person is still a human being, but you don't have to be part of that relationship. What you do is just be kind to them and say, you know what, I wasn't so grown up earlier on. We got into this relationship and it wasn't the best, thought through relationship. We don't have the same principles. We don't have the same long term goals. This is not going to work anyway. But it doesn't mean I have to be rude to you. You know, we don't need to be enemies. We're human beings on this tiny blue planet called Earth, right? It's really tiny compared to um, the rest of the universe, you know. And it's amazing. There's a great thing by Carl Sagan, I think, who he saw this picture of Earth from a satellite millions of miles away, how we're just alone on this little planet and we're all fighting each other and everything. It's amazing that we don't realize how really we kind of all we have is each other, sort of thing, and we need to value that, right? So there's no need to just hate the person next to you and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, so that kind of answers the second point, which is among friends and family. Yeah, you know what, find ways of connecting, and there's always going to be problems, especially in our not very moral societies where people are looking short term and kind of got the finger on the self-destruct button by being nasty to each other all the time. That it's going to be natural that people are going to be rude to you. But you're going to be happier when you are nice to people despite them being miserable and stuff like that. Sure, you got to lay some boundaries about in to what extent you're going to work with people who are going to be miserable. Find the people who are nice. There are still nice people around. You can work with them. Um, you know, if you're a nice person, you attract nice people. Birds of a feather flock together, and it's kind of true, right? Um, and finally, last few seconds, how do we reduce hatred and division in society? So, as they say, be the person who, be the answer that you want to look for in society, or be the solution, as it were. Don't expect other people. We have this thing in social media and everything about blaming the world for our problems. We've got to be the solution. Okay, then once you're the solution, maybe encourage other people by through a polite conversation. Like, you too also should be part of the solution. That's the only way forward, and you got to have patience. We always want instant solutions, but things don't work like that. It takes a lot of patience, and the people who really believe in what they're saying, they're the ones who are going to stick with it. The people who don't really believe it and just want to have placards and protests for one day, complain for a bit, they're not going to stick to changing the world. They don't really want it enough or believe in it enough. So anyway, thank you so much. Really appreciate you listening to the show. Thank you very much to my wife Khulud and my son, using 2 different accounts to make it look like people are participating, and they definitely did participate. Thank you very much for that. And for everybody else who watched the show or watching the show later on, I do these shows because I know these are the problems that society is facing all the time. I see it every day, and so hopefully somebody out there has benefited from it. Do join. Check out my show every week, bigquestionsanswered.com. There'll be a show, or the website's there. That's the timing there, 7 to 8 p.m. UK time. Do press the share, do press the like button at least, but share and subscribe if possible as well. Hopefully that will get the word out about the show. Thank you. Peace be upon you. Catch you next week.